the silence? Can you see the dark? Can you face the broken? Can you feel the Can you see the dark? Can you fix the broken? Can you heal a scar? And has anybody noticed my bloody sweater arm? Scream again, you feel my heart. Holding on, bring me close. Feel my heart. Can you feel my heart? Can you help the hopeless? Well, I'm begging on my knees. I can't drown my demons, they know how to swim. I'm scared to get close, I hate being alone. I'm over that feeling to not feel at all. The higher I get, the lower I'll sink. I can't drown my demons, they know how to swim. Can you feel the heart? Can you hear the silence? Can you see the dark? Can you fix the broken? Can you heal a scar? And has anybody noticed my bloody sweater arm?
근데 너 왜 안 물어봐?
Can you feel my heart?
이게 상처를 받은 방법이
残念ながら到着地はまだ現れていない。